There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises, a kind of suffering that slips past the eyes of the world unnoticed, because it happens in silence. No one sees the quiet betrayals. No one hears the words never spoken but deeply implied. No one knows what was done in the shadows when no one else was watching. But you do. You felt it. You were kind. You were present. You were real. And yet, they managed to hurt you in the stillness, without a scene, without a sound. They didn't scream at you. They didn't fight you. They simply withdrew their loyalty, their truth, their goodness, and left you bleeding quietly behind a smile. They wounded you with silence and blamed you for the echo. People saw the version of them that smiled in public and shook hands with virtue. But you saw the other version, the one behind closed doors, the one who lied by omission, the one who smiled to your face but slowly fed your heart to disappointment. And when you tried to speak, they turned the world against you with their charm, with their control, with their carefully designed silence. And maybe the most painful part was not what they did, but how easily they got away with it. No one questioned them. No one defended you. They didn't need to raise their voice. They raised their lies. They didn't need to stab you. They simply turned their back and let you drown in confusion. Your suffering became a silent room no one entered. Your tears became invisible ink on the pages of a story only you were forced to read. But here is what you must understand. Silence does not mean absence. Just because the world didn't witness your wounds doesn't mean heaven missed them. God doesn't need cameras. He doesn't rely on gossip to get the truth. He was there. He saw it all. The glances, the fake smiles, the hidden motives, the passive aggression, the emotional withdrawal. They were not hidden from him. And just because karma doesn't always move fast doesn't mean it forgot your address. Just because justice doesn't announce its arrival doesn't mean it won't knock on every door they closed in your face. There is a divine law at work in the background, quiet, precise, patient, and it always repays the debt, not in your timing, not in your way, but in a manner that makes it undeniable that God was taking notes the whole time. Do you really think they'll escape it? Do you believe they'll laugh forever while you weep? No, that's not how it works. That's not how it ever works. What was done in silence will be echoed in divine noise. What they whispered behind your back will become a thunder in their own soul. The peace they stole from you will become the storm that keeps them up at night. Their lies may have been loud to the world, but God's correction will echo louder in there. There is something holy about being mistreated silently, something sacred about enduring betrayal with grace. Because when you don't retaliate, when you don't stoop to their level, when you carry the pain instead of throwing it back, you invite heaven to act on your behalf. You hand over the sword and say, "This is yours now." And what God does with that is far more righteous and far more devastating than anything you could ever imagine. Let them laugh now. Let them celebrate the silence. Let them dance on the stage they built with lies. Because one day soon the lights will change. The stage will collapse, and all that was hidden will be shouted from the rooftops. Not by your voice, but by the voice of divine justice. The silence they used to hurt you will become the echo that ruins their peace. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to beg for truth to come out. You just need to keep walking. Keep believing. Keep trusting that your silence was never weakness. It was strength. The kind of strength that lets God speak for you. And when he speaks, even the echoes shake the ground. So hold your peace, because God is preparing something louder than every lie ever told about you. There's a weight that sits on the chest of those who have been hurt in silence. It's not the kind of burden you can explain to others in a single sentence. It lingers in your thoughts when you're alone. It shadows your laughter, and it interrupts your sleep like a quiet ghost that doesn't scream, only stares. This kind of wound is almost more cruel than any open conflict, because at least then others can see what was done to you. But silent hurt? It leaves you carrying both the pain and the burden of having to convince the world that it even happened. And the ones who inflicted that pain, they carry no guilt, or so it seems. They move forward with confidence, cloaked in their charisma, gathering sympathy and admiration, while you're left trying to gather yourself. They speak sweetly in public, present kindness on their face, and never reveal the shadows in their soul. But behind the scenes, they stripped your spirit, stole your confidence, and fed their ego with the parts of you they slowly broke down. And the worst part is, they made it look like you were the one who changed, like you were too emotional, too sensitive, too difficult. All the while you were just reacting to the spiritual war they were waging silently against your peace. But silence never fooled God. Every moment you spent questioning your worth, every time you cried after pretending to smile, every silent dinner you sat through with a heart that felt invisible, God was watching. The heavens are not blind to private pain. They are not deaf to unspoken prayers. And they are certainly not slow to respond when one of his children has been torn apart under the guise of peace. You see, God has a way of balancing things, a sacred way of turning the unseen into the unforgettable. When he moves, he doesn't need to shout. He whispers into reality the kind of justice that no one can outrun, the kind of karma that doesn't just punish, it teaches. It doesn't just correct, it exposes. The very ones who hurt you silently will find themselves trapped in a loud reality they can't control, and they won't even see it coming. They may have laughed with friends about how easily they discarded you. They may have boasted behind closed doors about how calm and composed they looked while your heart shattered. They may have celebrated your pain like a quiet victory. But there's something terrifying about karma's precision. It strikes at the heart of what they value most, not to destroy them, but to remind them. To remind them of what they broke without consequence, to humble them with the truth they tried to bury. And you, the one who was hurt, you won't need to lift a finger. That's the power in divine justice. You get to rise without revenge. You get to walk forward without bitterness, because the one who saw it all has already planned what they must face. And it won't be a performance. It won't be a show. It will be their reality day after day. They will feel what you felt, not because you wished it upon them, but because heaven restores balance. But the restoration isn't just about them. It's about you. Because when God allows karma to echo louder than their lies, he's not just punishing them, he's redeeming you. He's showing you that your silence wasn't weakness, it was a seed that now blossoms into justice, into peace, into vindication. You didn't lose because you stayed quiet. You won because you trusted heaven to speak louder than you ever could. And one day, when you no longer even think about them, when you've moved on, healed, grown, and reclaimed your worth, they'll still be facing the sound of what they did, not from your mouth, but from the life that now refuses to bless them the way it once blessed you. That's how karma works when God is involved. It doesn't scream, it echoes. There comes a moment, somewhere between endurance and exhaustion, where your soul begins to whisper questions you never thought you'd ask. Was it really love? Was I ever valued? Did they know what they were doing to me? Or was I simply a casualty of their convenience? These aren't the questions of weakness. These are the sacred cries of someone who loved genuinely and suffered invisibly. You tried to convince yourself it wasn't intentional. You excused their distance, their coldness, their indifference. You told yourself they were just going through something, just tired, just distracted. But deep down, your spirit knew. You knew when their silence became louder than any insult ever could. And still, you stayed. Not out of desperation, but out of belief. Because you believed in people, you believed in second chances. You believed that if you just loved enough, gave enough, endured enough, they would see you, understand you, choose you. But the more you stayed, the more your soul was silenced. The more you gave, the more they took, until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the version of yourself that remained. That is the pain only the deeply kind ever truly understand, the pain of losing yourself trying to keep someone else whole. And they let you. They let you carry the burden. They let you become the villain in a story you were bleeding to save. They twisted the truth so subtly, so strategically that by the time you began to speak, no one believed you. And that's what made it so isolating. Not just the betrayal itself, but the way they made you feel crazy for feeling it. But God is not confused by manipulation. Heaven is not swayed by appearances. Divine truth has no interest in the masks people wear. The truth you were gaslighted into hiding, God already knew. And while they were spinning stories, He was watching seeds being planted. Seeds of accountability, seeds of consequence, seeds of karma that would grow in silence and bloom in justice. They thought your silence made you powerless. They thought because you walked away without retaliation, they had won, but they never understood the depth of what you were doing. You weren't surrendering, you were stepping aside. You weren't giving up, you were giving it to God. And that surrender is the most dangerous move anyone can make, because it hands the situation over to the only one who sees every motive, every manipulation, every shadow hidden in the heart. And now their season of silence is over. Life is beginning to mirror back to them what they so comfortably gave to you: the indifference, the rejection, the confusion, the emotional emptiness. What they fed you in secret is now being served to them publicly, not because you wished it, but because you endured it. And in God's hands, what is endured with grace becomes the very force that turns the tide. And the irony? When it begins to fall apart for them, they won't know why. They won't see the connection. They'll blame everything else. They'll call it bad luck, misunderstanding, betrayal from others. But deep inside, a voice will rise. A voice they can't silence. A voice that whispers, "This is what you gave. This is what you sowed. This is what you thought would never return. And you won't need to explain a thing. You won't need to justify your pain or relive the story, because healing has already started. And healing doesn't shout. Healing whispers, 'Let it go. Watch what I do.' That's how heaven works. It doesn't argue with liars. It doesn't beg for clarity. It lets time, truth, and karma do what they were divinely created to do: reveal what was hidden and restore what was broken. So keep walking, keep rising, keep choosing silence over chaos, not because you're weak, but because your strength is now in God's hands. And that's where justice always speaks loudest. Time has a strange way of peeling back what people once buried. When someone hurts you in silence, they assume time will work in their favor, that the longer they pretend, the more convincing their version of the story becomes. And for a while, it does seem like that. They move through life untouched, unbothered, unrepentant. You see them surrounded by praise, by friends, by people who believe their charm and applaud their image, and meanwhile, you're left holding a truth that no one else seems to care about. It feels unfair. It feels like injustice dressed as peace. But time is not their ally. Time belongs to truth, because truth is patient. It doesn't need to scream to survive. It only needs to wait. And in the waiting, it grows stronger. In the silence, it gathers momentum. And when the moment comes, when life finally decides to balance what's being unjustly tilted, it doesn't just correct the wrong. It exposes the entire foundation on which that wrong was built. The people who hurt you silently didn't just make a mistake. They built a life on deception. They constructed friendships, reputations, relationships, even their identity, around the lie that they were innocent, kind, honest. But lies have an expiration date. You can hide poison in a smile, but eventually it leaks. You can cover betrayal in politeness, but eventually the truth bleeds through the cracks. And when that happens, it doesn't fall apart gently. It unravels with force. And what unravels first is their peace. They begin to feel a weight that no success can lift, a hollowness that no applause can fill. They start to question the very things they once celebrated, not because of guilt, because of consequence. Life begins to echo. It begins to mirror, and what once gave them comfort now feels cold. The friends who once adored them start to distance. The energy they once carried becomes heavy. It's not punishment, it's reflection. It's life showing them what silence cost someone else. And it is in this silent unraveling that karma begins to speak, not in loud cinematic ways, but in subtle, haunting echoes. They'll see someone walk away from them the way they walked away from you. They'll feel misunderstood the way they left you confused. They'll encounter silence, not the peaceful kind, but the tormenting kind, the kind that leaves you alone with your own actions. And they'll look for someone to blame, someone to reason with. But there will be none. Just the sound of their own decisions now turned against them. And while all of this unfolds, you'll have changed. You'll no longer be the broken version they left behind. You'll no longer be the one begging for clarity, chasing their validation. You'll have healed in places they thought you'd stay shattered. You'll have risen in silence the same way they hurt you. And that growth, that healing, that peace, it will be the loudest echo of all. Because there is nothing louder than a life restored by God. Nothing more powerful than someone who refused to return evil for evil and was lifted because of it. And when people see you, when they notice the peace in your eyes, the strength in your voice, the grace in your voice, they won't need to hear your side of the story. They'll feel it. The truth will have found its way to the surface without you ever needing to force it. That's the kind of justice heaven writes. It doesn't need drama. It doesn't need revenge. It only needs time, and when time is handed to God, it becomes a tool of mercy for the innocent and a mirror of accountability for the guilty. So if you're still waiting, still wondering when the truth will rise, let this remind you. The silence was never the end. It was the setup, the quiet before the echo, and now life is ready to speak, louder, clearer, and more faithfully than any words you could have said yourself. There's something almost unbearable about being made to feel invisible by people who once swore they saw you. When someone you trusted begins to treat your presence like a background noise, just there, not needed, not cherished, it does something to your soul. It doesn't just break your heart, it shakes your identity, because you start to question whether your love, your presence, your goodness ever meant anything to them at all. And the worst part is, they do it so quietly, so casually, as if you're fading not because of what they're doing, but because of something wrong with you. But the truth is, they saw your light. That's exactly why they tried to dim it in silence. It wasn't that you were hard to love. It was that you were too real for someone who only wanted shallow control. They couldn't manipulate you easily, so they tried to make you small. They couldn't dominate your spirit, so they tried to wear it down gently, with silence, with distance, with inconsistency. It wasn't accidental, it was methodical. And yet you still loved them, defended them, gave them the benefit of every doubt. You stayed when it would have been easier to walk away, because your heart doesn't know how to abandon people it cares for. You gave second chances not because you were naive, but because you were loyal. And that loyalty became the very thing they exploited, not with cruelty on the surface, but with calculated detachment. They knew how to hurt you without looking like the villain, and they did it well. But what they never expected was that God was watching in complete silence too, not intervening immediately, not exposing them right away, because He wanted to give them time to repent, time to reflect, time to realize the pain they were causing. But when someone mistakes God's patience for permission, they invite a justice that is no longer gentle. They provoke a shift in the spiritual order, and suddenly everything they built on dishonesty begins to collapse, quietly at first, and then with thunder, because heaven has a way of returning what was sent out. And when someone sends out disregard, manipulation, emotional abandonment, they don't just lose a person. They lose favor. They lose peace. They lose the protection that was once around them because you were praying for them. And once you're no longer there, once your pure heart is no longer covering them with grace they didn't even realize they were receiving, life begins to withdraw its mercy. They start to feel the void, but it's too late. They can't recreate what they destroyed. They can't find the peace they once took for granted. And no matter who comes next, no matter what mask they wear, they will never again be loved the way you loved them. Because that kind of love doesn't return to the same place twice. It evolves. It finds new soil. It blesses someone who won't treat it like a burden. And the silence they use to harm you, it becomes the silence that haunts them. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow kind. The kind where nothing satisfies. The kind where memories echo louder than joy. The kind where every quiet moment reminds them of what they lost. Not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves the day they mistook your love for weakness. And in that space, you are no longer the broken one. You are the restored. You are the one God lifted without needing to humiliate anyone, because your blessing is not built on revenge, it's built on release. You let go and heaven took over. You turned your pain into prayer, your silence into strength, and your suffering into sacred ground. And that is why the echo of their actions will never leave them in peace. One of the most painful realizations you come to after silent betrayal is that not only were you hurt, you were never defended. You were left to suffer in silence while they painted pictures of themselves as victims, as heroes, as saints. You watch them twist the truth so elegantly that even people who once knew your heart began to doubt you. And what makes this ache even deeper is that you were not asking for revenge. You were simply hoping that someone, anyone, would see, would hear your unspoken cries, would notice that behind your composed face lived a soul quietly breaking. But God noticed. God saw what no one else cared to look for. And when heaven sees the kind of betrayal that unfolds in silence, it doesn't forget, it doesn't ignore, it doesn't rush either. Because the kind of justice God delivers is not temporary, it is transforming. It doesn't just level the scales, it changes the landscape entirely. The world may forget what they did to you. They may carry on as if it never happened, but God is not the world. He is the witness of every hidden act, the keeper of every tear, the defender of the unseen. And so, while they were building their reputation on top of your silence, heaven was preparing a mirror, not made of glass, but of consequence. A mirror that doesn't reflect what they pretend to be, but what they truly are. And slowly, piece by piece, life begins to reflect their actions. Not immediately, not dramatically, but deeply, precisely, with a kind of divine poetry that cannot be explained, only felt. Because the kind of pain they caused you does not disappear into nothingness. It becomes the seed of a lesson they must one day live through, not because you wished it, but because God cannot be mocked. Whatever a person sows, that they shall also reap. And they sowed indifference, they sowed abandonment, they sowed lies wrapped in quiet cruelty. And now, life is preparing the harvest. What once seemed like their victory will become their burden. The very people they manipulated will begin to see through the performance. The spaces they once walked into with pride will become places of discomfort. Conversations they controlled with charm will turn cold. And the version of themselves they convinced others to believe in will slowly start to dissolve. Not because you said anything, but because truth cannot stay hidden forever. And through all of this you are rising, not with bitterness, not with the desire to be proven right, but with a quiet strength that no one can explain. Your peace will become suspicious to those who tried to destroy you. Your joy will unsettle those who assumed you'd never recover. Because when God restores, He doesn't just put you back together, He makes you unrecognizable to the ones who broke you. And that restoration becomes its own form of revelation, a holy echo that speaks louder than the lies ever did. The most humbling part for them will not be the loss itself, but the realization that they once had access to something sacred, and they treated it like it was disposable. That they once sat in the presence of someone who would have gone to war for them, and instead they chose to wound you in silence. That kind of regret is not loud. It is personal, it is private, and it lingers in the soul long after the applause has faded. And you won't need to defend your story, because the evidence of your healing will speak for itself. The fruit of your resilience, the favor on your life, the peace that surrounds you, these things will stand as testimony, not to the pain you endured, but to the power of the one who carried you through it. There's a divine strength hidden in restraint, especially when every part of you wanted to speak, to fight, to expose, to explain. But you didn't. You stayed silent, not because you lacked the truth, but because you refused to lose your soul trying to prove it. That kind of silence, the kind born from self-control and trusting God's justice, is not weakness, it's sacred. It is the strength of someone who knows that not every battle must be fought with words, and not every lie deserves an answer. You saw the truth long before anyone else did. You saw the signs, the shifts in tone, the subtle detachment, the coldness masked by kindness. You felt the change in their energy, the absence in their presence, the growing space where love used to live. But instead of exploding, you observed. Instead of retaliating, you prayed. You stood in the fire without setting anything else on fire. And in doing so, you allowed heaven to step in and fight the battle your heart couldn't carry alone. And now that silence, the one they thought was their shield, is turning against them. They never thought it would speak. They never imagined that the very silence they used to conceal their wrongdoing would become the evidence of their betrayal. Because time has a way of revealing what was hidden. And the longer someone hides behind lies, the louder the truth becomes when it finally arrives. Not with drama, not with noise, but with undeniable clarity. They may have convinced others, they may have shaped the narrative, but they cannot outrun what they've set in motion. There is a spiritual law that governs this universe, and it does not operate by popularity or perception. It operates by intention. And the intention behind what they did, the coldness, the deception, the manipulation, was never hidden from the one who judges the heart. He doesn't need to hear their words. He measures their spirit. And what he saw was not noble. It was not kind. It was not innocent. So now what they gave is returning, not as punishment, but as revelation. They will begin to experience what it feels like to be overlooked, misunderstood, discarded, the same way they made you feel without saying a single word. And it won't come from you. It will come from life itself. The same silence they used will find them, but not as a weapon, as a mirror, a reflection of what they once were so comfortable inflicting. And in that moment, they will remember you, not the broken version, not the pleading version, but the strong, silent one who walked away without screaming, who carried dignity through devastation. And they will realize, far too late, that your silence was never weakness. It was prophecy. It was the quiet before the shift, the stillness before the storm of truth. You see, silence holds power. It watches what pride cannot see. It protects what impulsiveness would ruin. And when that silence is rooted in faith, it becomes an altar, one on which you place your pain and allow heaven to turn it into purpose. That's what you did. You didn't collapse under the weight of injustice. You turned your heartbreak into holy ground. And now, God is building something from the ashes they left you in. And the beauty of it all is that you don't have to shout to be heard anymore. Your growth is speaking. Your peace is speaking. Your joy is a declaration. Every smile you wear without bitterness. Every step you take without fear. It is a silent sermon that shakes the ground more than any accusation ever could. And those who hurt you, they hear it now. They feel the vibration of what they lost. They see the light they once tried to dim, and it blinds them. Not because you forced it, but because God lifted you. And when God lifts someone, no lie, no silence, no betrayal can keep that person down. What they thought was the end was actually the beginning. And now their silence has become the stage upon which your healing stands, echoing louder than their lies ever did. There's a kind of justice that doesn't arrive with noise, but when it does arrive, it leaves no doubt. For a long time, you watched them win. You watched them smile without consequence, thrive without remorse, gather support without ever acknowledging what they did to you. And it's that quiet injustice that pierced you the most. Not just the hurt they caused, but the way they seemed to rise after causing it. You looked at their life and wondered if God had closed his eyes, if the pain you endured would ever matter to anyone but you. But divine justice is never rushed. It waits until pride is loudest. Then it speaks, not to destroy, but to reveal. It speaks in ways the soul cannot ignore. It brings to light the unseen, unspoken weight of their actions. And when it does, it doesn't just break illusions. It breaks the illusion that silence protects the guilty forever. Because silence is not protection. Silence is a pause. And that pause exists only to give them a chance to repent. If they don't, that same silence becomes the echo of their own undoing. They will begin to feel it, not as punishment, but as a quiet unraveling. The relationships they once used to validate themselves will feel different. The joy they faked will turn hollow. The places where they were once celebrated will feel foreign. And they won't understand it at first. They'll try to fix it with distractions, with charm, with excuses, but none of it will work. Because what's shifting isn't their surroundings, it's the weight of their soul finally waking up. And what makes this justice so perfect is that it doesn't require your hands. You don't have to explain what they did. You don't have to replay the past or gather sympathy. God is doing the explaining now, through their circumstances, through their loneliness, through the unexplained unease that clings to them in the quiet. What they did in silence is now returning to them in silence. What they tried to bury is now rising to confront them, not with your voice, but with the weight of their own conscience. And while they unravel, you are being restored, quietly, powerfully, faithfully. You're finding your voice, not the kind that argues, but the kind that speaks life. You're rebuilding, not from scraps, but from a deeper strength born in the fire they thought would consume you. You are not rising for revenge. You are rising because truth has found its way back to you. And when truth returns, it doesn't just free you. It surrounds you. It reclaims the places where you were silenced and turns them into ground you now stand on with grace. And here's what they'll never be able to take from you again: your peace, your clarity, your strength. Because once you've survived silent betrayal, you learn to trust the quiet more than the crowd. You learn that silence doesn't mean defeat. It means depth. It means waiting on the one who sees what others miss. And when he moves, nothing can stop what he has prepared for those who endured with dignity. So when they see you now, they won't understand. They'll see someone healed, someone stronger, someone glowing with a light that no longer seeks validation. And that will be their reminder, not just of what they lost, but of what they tried to destroy and couldn't. Your presence will convict them, not with words, but with the undeniable testimony of survival. And that presence will echo in every space they tried to silence you in, because this is how God works. He doesn't just restore, He reveals. He allows the ones who hurt you to watch as you walk into rooms they tried to lock, as you carry peace they tried to steal, as you smile with a joy they swore you'd never find again. And all of it, every step, every moment, is louder than their lies ever were. And now you stand, not as a victim of their silence, but as a witness to God's voice. You didn't scream. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't crumble beneath the weight of what they tried to do quietly. You endured. You wept in private. You kept going when no one clapped for you. And in doing so, you became the kind of soul heaven fights for. Let the world keep its noise. Let them write their stories. The truth has already been written by a hand greater than yours. And in that truth, you are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not abandoned. You are protected. You are rising. you are heard, so walk forward, not to prove them wrong, but to live the life they never believed you could. Not because you want to make a sound, but because your healing has become a sound all its own. A sound that echoes beyond their lies. A sound heaven never stopped listening to. They hurt you silently, but now God has spoken, and His voice will always be louder.